This is going to be one of those controversial classic game room reviews because today I'm reviewing the Nintendo 64 controller. And say one thing about this, there's certainly no other controller that resembles this thing. This is very unique, and Nintendo gets points for creativity and innovation. However, it's not one of my favorite controllers. And before I get into the details of this thing, because it is interesting, let me explain why it's not one of my favorites. Now, my favorite controller ever made is this one for the Sega Genesis. It's just clean, simple, wide open, easy to play with larger adult hands, big buttons, comfortable D-pad, and it just looks cool. Now, it's difficult to make a transition over to this, which has buttons all over the place in interesting locations. And if you're playing Goldeneye or something, it's a perfectly functional controller, but you have to squeeze one hand in here and then try to get another one into another spot on the controller, and frankly, it's just not big enough. It works really well for Robotron 64, because you play it like that, or at least I play it like that, and that's no problem because your hands are spaced out, and the buttons, there's nothing wrong with the buttons on this thing. I think it's just more when you try to squeeze one hand in here and then use another one there, and then it's really difficult to get these buttons on top. But let's take a look at it. First of all, it does have a D-pad up here, which is nice and comfortable. Nothing wrong with that. It says Nintendo. Comes in a variety of colors. Mine just happens to be blue. Start button right in the front. And a very interesting analog stick in the middle of the controller. This thing is like the Y-wing of video game controllers. Pull that out, and that's where the memory card goes. I kind of like that. That's actually pretty neat. The build quality of this is, it feels nice. I mean, there's nothing apparently wrong with it, and this is a fairly old controller by this point, and it still works well. It doesn't feel as rock solid as Nintendo's or some of Nintendo's other controllers, like the original NES controllers or the GameCube controller, but I have a feeling this thing will last quite a while and not have any issues. Take a look at the analog thumbstick right in the middle, and it does give you a little molding here on this center thing that you can grip with your hand and use it with your thumb. By putting the thumbstick in the middle, they do make it possible to play a game like that, or to play a game like that. Little ridges in there so it doesn't slip off your thumb, even though it's made of a hard plastic. Doesn't have quite enough resistance, in my opinion. But again, there's nothing terribly wrong with it. Then there's the trigger. This is just interesting. The Z button down here. I've never seen any other controller that does this. But they give you a little molding. You can get that in the light there. Your hand fits in. You can squeeze the trigger and shoot people in Goldeneye. Aim with that, or move with that, or aim with this and move with that, depending how you set your controls up, which is one of the cool things about Goldeneye. And, well, that's the N64 controller. If we step back and actually look at this thing from a distance, next to its younger sibling, the Nintendo GameCube controller, you can see what they've done is they've essentially removed this middle piece and then shifted all the buttons and sticks around. Sort of. But like I mentioned, this thing works very well for playing a game like Robotron 64 because you're grabbing it on the outside, two things, and then playing it like that, using the familiar Robotron controls. For the GameCube controller, they've essentially done the same thing. Move your hands to the outside, and then you play using, these kind of controls. And there you have it, one of the most unique controllers ever created. It proudly boasts Nintendo right on the front of it, which reminds me, don't you guys miss the good old days of Sega versus Nintendo rivalry? Like, weren't those the days? Back when each game console actually was completely different and different games were released on them? Like Sonic vs. Mario? Come on. Those were fun. I miss those days. Someone needs to get Sega back in the hardware race so we can get the rivalry going again.